All right. So just briefly, hopefully you all know who FACC is, but I like to start with who we are. We are a professional membership organization for the faculty of the California Community Colleges. Our mission is to inform, educate, empower, and advocate for faculty in service to students. And I think it is important to know that we have been around since 1953. And it was a group of faculty as professionals who came together to form an organization. We are not a union, but we were very instrumental in creating both the ASCCC and the unions in the state of California. So faculty are incredibly powerful when we come together, and we can make enormous change. And I think that's what I've been trying to do as FACC president, is get people to start realizing their power and their ability to advocate and to affect the legislative bills that are coming out. I think that we don't realize as faculty how much power we have. I did have some a leadership training, national leadership training, and they sent us to Florida to try and convert people to unions, faculty to union members. And it is pretty shocking if you go into another state like Florida or Texas, what little power the faculty have in the classroom and in curriculum. And so I think you need to respect the amazing amount of voice and power we have in the state of California and use it. But it takes time, and I know you're all exhausted. And I thank you for being here today and doing just one more thing as faculty for our students. So I really appreciate your time. So we're going to go through a few of our FACC-sponsored bills, and then we're going to go into probably a pretty lengthy conversation today about AB 1705. And yes, I'm saying it right, 1705. I had a few people email me say, Wendy, you keep putting a typo and saying it's 1705 when it's 705. No, it's not a joke. There is a new bill out and it's 1705. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about that today, and hopefully give you some resources so you can be great advocates. I already said this out loud. Okay, so I'm going to hand it off to Stephanie to start. She has to make sure she puts herself back up on the spotlight. Oh, you are. Okay, good. And
yeah, I'm spotlight.
Go for it.
All right. So FACC has a couple of amazing bills that we're sponsoring this year. Bills that so far, knock on wood, are less controversial than what Wendy's going to be talking about later in this roundtable. The first bill is AB 2315. This is being authored by Dr. Arambula. Dr. Arambula also authored the bill we ran last year, which ended up passing and being signed by the governor. And what AB 2315 would do is it would require colleges to allow students, staff, and faculty to use their chosen name on any records that don't require a legal name. This actually came from some of our faculty who attended a work group we had in August, where we were talking about issues faculty are facing. And there are some campuses where transgendered faculty as well as transgender students have struggled with being allowed to use their chosen names. This comes on the heels of a bill from last year, AB 245, which allows graduates to change their names on legal documents if their name has already been legally changed. Now, in this case, we're not requiring legal name changes because legally changing a first name is an incredibly difficult and long-term process, and not everybody has the resources or the time to do it, and it does take quite a while. So our goal with this bill is to try to prevent dead naming going forward. So far, we've gotten incredible responses for it. Assemblymember Lowe is going to be a co-author on it. And then I've been working with a couple of other groups who are interested in potentially co-sponsoring, and those groups are from the LGBTQ realm. So this is a super exciting bill we're working on. The other big sponsored legislation we're working on is Senate Resolution 45. Now, a Senate resolution is not a law, it won't be binding, but this is still pretty important. And what this would do is it would have the Senate recognize the importance of academic freedom for faculty. So academic freedom is a hot topic. I think we've all seen in the news the controversy in other states, I won't mention which ones, over things like critical race theory, ethnic studies. California is proud to be a progressive state, and our faculty need the ability to decolonize the curriculum where appropriate. So this is the first step, we hope, of many in really helping empower academic freedom for our faculty. Next slide, Wendy. Thank you. FACC is also co-sponsoring quite a few other bills. AB 1752, this is an Assemblymember Santiago bill, and this is a bill that is working for part-time faculty pay parity. This would require hourly compensation for part-time faculty members to be equal to the amount of compensation to full-time faculty members. It's sponsored by the California Teachers Association, and as I mentioned, co-sponsored by us. It will be heard in Assembly Higher Education in early April. We are also co-sponsoring AB 1856. This is authored by Assembly Member Medina, longtime community college faculty champion. And this is a bill relating to part-time faculty teaching load. If this sounds familiar, it's because we've co-sponsored similar bills in the past, including one last year that made it all the way through the legislature and then was vetoed by the governor. The difference is this time, there's a budget ask, a $200 million budget ask that is accompanying this bill, which we're hoping will counter the governor's veto message when it comes to it. So this bill would permit faculty or part-time faculty from teaching up to 67% of a full-time load to going up to 80 to 85%. Next slide, Wendy. We are also co-sponsoring AB 1505, which is an Assemblymember Rodriguez bill. This has been a super interesting bill. We are currently in the second year of a 2-year cycle. And this bill is interesting because, and it's sponsored by California Federation of Teachers, who we're working closely with. It's really interesting because it's what we call a gut and amend, which means back in December, it was AB 1505 was being used for a totally different bill. The author basically deleted everything in it and then amended it to be this rebench the full-time faculty obligation number. So this would rebench the faculty obligation number to fall 2023 and then require full-time faculty numbers be adjusted annually after. What's interesting with this one being in the second year of a 2-year term is in early January, we had to very quickly work with CFT and the author's office to get it through its policy committee, Assembly Higher Education, and then its subsequent committees. It made it through and it actually passed the Assembly floor by the end of January, and now we're waiting for it to head to the Senate. We are also co-sponsoring AB 2820. This is defund Calbright, eliminate Calbright, whatever you want to call it. Eliminating Calbright College is a priority, or has historically been a priority for FACC, so we're happy to be working with Assembly Member Medina's office once again, as well as CFT on this bill. Next bill. Oh, and it's worth mentioning CCCI is also co-sponsoring both AB 1505 and I believe AB 2820, but David, you're on here, so correct me if I'm wrong about the second one.
So I'd like to pause there and see if there are any questions about any of our sponsored or co-sponsored legislation before we transition to talk about AB 1705. And Kim has her hand up. Go ahead, Kim.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on the rebenching of the FON. I'm not exactly sure what that bill is doing.
Yeah, so the current FON numbers are based on 1988 numbers, and we want to rebench it to where we currently are, or where colleges currently are. Most of them are actually above their FON, so we'd like to make where they're currently sitting the new benchmark for them.
So if I can add, what happens with the FON is that originally, the idea of the faculty obligation number was that we were going to make some progress on the ratio of full-time to part-time so that we'd have more full-time positions in the California community colleges. What has happened instead is that as soon as the enrollment floats down or budgets float down, then the FON has floated down. The FON is numbers are calculated and distributed from the Chancellor's office. So we have this problem where every time we make progress with enrollment growth, usually, then they float back down as soon as enrollment starts to drop, and that's what we're seeing again. So our idea is to try and help sort of lock in some of that progress so that we're not constantly floating it back down, all the way back down to the 1980s.
Okay, so can I just ask, I know that not that long ago, there was a work group. I think Julie Bruno was on it. I think Jim Mailer, there was a number of people who are working on reconfiguring that number altogether and then reassessing what would be instructional and non-instructional. Is there any talk of that getting resurrected? This is just locking in the number at where we are instead of
right. This is just one piece. But that I did bring that up at the Consultation Council yesterday and said that we should shake out this report and start talking about it as system practitioners. And there were other groups who were interested in looking at it. And there are also some recommendations and resolutions from ASCCC about the FON and the 50% law. So maybe that will be coming back out, but not this legislative season.
Okay, great. Thank you.
John Martin, you had your hand up?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
In particular, those two bills by Santiago and Medina, there doesn't seem to be any mandatory requirement to do this. In other words, there's no teeth to these bills, or are there? I mean, they could say, no, we're not going to do it. Oh, we're going to do it. Then, oh, negotiation fell off, and therefore nothing gets done. So is there any sort of teeth to these bills?
Steph, do you want to address that? Because you've been handling these bills more than I have.
For the part-time faculty teaching load, this is more to open up the flexibility for districts and as well as part-time faculty members who may want higher or more course loads, or higher course loads. So there wouldn't be any teeth to that because, again, this is just sort of giving them more control or more flexibility at the district level. As far as AB 1752 goes, I mean, the teeth is that it would be in law. So do we have concerns about districts enforcing this? We'll have to see how that plays out.
Barbara.
Hi, so concerning AB 1572, I looked over the bill and it says comparable, to full-time, and that's great. But the biggest issue, of course, that many part-time faculty face is that they're only paid when they're in the classroom. So would this help to close that gap? Because our full-time people make for every hour in the classroom, they get an hour outside it for prep and grading, which is not available to our part-time faculty. Is that what this is meant to close, or are they going to argue, no, this is only, teaching to teaching?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great question. I'll look deeper into it and talk to the author's office. I can't remember off the top of my head, but what I do recall is that it was teaching to teaching. But I think you bring up a great point, and that's worth further conversation.
We can bring these two bills back as a focus of our next legislative roundtable and spend a lot of time on these two bills. We had these similar two bills last year. One made it through and was vetoed by the governor. The other one didn't make it out of appropriations. But we can dedicate one full hour of a roundtable to these. And often bills go through amendments and when they hit their policy committee, so we will see developments in these bills. So definitely email Stephanie or myself with questions so we know how to make sure that we have the answers for you for the next legislative roundtable. Is it Bevel or Beville?
Oh, it's Bevel.
Bevel, go ahead.
Yeah, so I am the FA part-time vice president at Pasadena City College. And something we've been advocating for many years is health insurance benefits for part-time faculty. Mm-hmm. So are there any bills that's going to focus on this issue? And how can faculty like myself assist with that process?
So that's actually in the state budget. And there is a couple slides at the end about the state budget process, but there is 200 million for part-time faculty healthcare. And I think the piece, I mean, I'm hoping the money stays there. We hear good things, but we need to advocate to make sure the 200 million stays in the budget ask. But the second part is, I think we need to make it more meaningful, because often what happens is districts have a choice whether they're going to pull into this healthcare money or not, and they just decide they don't want to do it because it's not worth the time or effort. So we do need to do some work. First, secure the money. Second, how do we make sure that it's meaningful, so it doesn't end up like a pile of money, like the part-time office hours, right? That like they have this huge pile of money, but they're not doing anything with it. So how can we make sure that the districts, it's mandatory for them to make sure that it gets to part-time faculty? So we will definitely add that to our roundtable focus, because it's also a companion piece to this new bill 1856. So last year we had that bill got through, right, of allowing loads to go up to 85% for part-time faculty, but then made it through the Assembly, made it through the Senate, and then it was vetoed by the governor because he was afraid of the Affordable Care Act kicking in and then not having the ability to provide healthcare for part-time. So now with the two pieces, we're hopeful. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so I am going to go on, if that's okay with everyone. Do you have another question? No, okay, perfect. All right, thank you guys. Okay, so I'm going to start here. I love this slide because it gives hopefully an overview of all the legislative mandates that we've had in a little over a decade. And some of them aren't necessarily mandates, but they fit into all the work that we're doing. If you're tired, this is why you're tired, because there's a lot of mandates and goal setting and changes to our system that have been happening in the last few years. And I want to say that most of the goals that all these pieces of legislation have are good goals. Do we want more students to transfer? Of course. Do we want more students to be successful? Of course. Do we want to help our students? Of course. So it's very difficult often to argue with the goals of much of this legislation, which makes advocacy more difficult, right? If you have a bill that says our goal is to have students transfer, and you say, well, I don't like your bill, you kind of sound like a jerk. So part of the problem is how these bills are framed, how the narrative in which they're sold in is often this nice little equity package. And that if you argue against these bills, which sometimes they're pretty complex in certain areas, it's difficult to talk about them. So one of the goals that we have at FACC here is to train you in advocacy. And in that link that I put in the chat, you'll see there's an advocacy training webinar that Ginny May from the Academic Senate and I are doing to train you guys to go meet with your representatives so you're comfortable doing that. And we try and have a lot of resources like this roundtable to help educate you on what's happening. But what the sort of umbrella for all of these things that are in front of you is there's a concentration on transfer, the transfer pathway. And the more that we, and most of these mandates have special interest groups who have come up with these ideas. So special interest groups are funded by large corporations. Again, the goals are often sound great, but the solutions are typically either oversimplified or not the right solution for the California community colleges, and almost completely do not include the faculty voice. So as a faculty member, I've been at College of Canyons for 25 years. I am very aware of what my students need and how to make them successful. And we have spent over a decade just clarifying the path to transfer. But we've done very little in terms of student basic needs, mental health, and the total cost of college, right? So we're wondering why transfer isn't getting better. Well, we can't just clear out barriers, which we've done a ton of, clearing out barriers and trying to clarify the path and trying to focus on transfer. It's a lot more complicated than that. And we need to make sure as faculty, we're bringing our voice into the legislators' offices, bring students along and say, these are what our students need. We can't just simply make things clearer to them. We have to support them in ways to make them successful. Okay, so the bills to watch in this legislation season, I'm going to spend most of my time on one bill right now. We're going to have more of these as the season goes on, but this is the big one. And I'm going to rewind to 2017. So AB 705, Irwin, probably everybody in the room has heard about it. If you haven't, I don't know why you haven't heard about it. So this bill, and this is a bill that was passed by the Assembly and passed by the Senate and was signed into law. It is law. I'm going to repeat, it is law. And there is nothing that you are going to do in this legislative season to change this law. You have to separate this law from the bill that's in process. This law simply says that we are going to increase the chance that a student can enter and complete transfer level math and English in 1 year. 3 years of their ESL. And I think I can agree with that as a faculty member, I should do whatever I can in my power to make sure students can get through English level, transfer level English and math in 1 year. I can't argue with that. So when you go into a legislator's office and you say, I hate AB 705, that's what you're saying you hate. You don't have to argue with me, just hear me, right? It also said that we shouldn't be using things like AccuPlacer, right? And I took calculus in high school. I took AP calculus in high school, and I used AccuPlacer years later, and I was placed like 5 levels below in math. So what our AccuPlacer and those practices also were putting people at a lower level than they needed to be. So it also said, let's use something like high school coursework or GPA. Okay, the third part is the part that everybody's frustrated with, and that's why I'm trying to separate it for you. It says that the BOG gets to establish regulations. The BOG is the Board of Governors. They are appointed by the governor of California. They are real estate people and business people, and there is a board of trustee on there and a couple faculty and a couple students, but for the most part, it's a large board of people who know the governor. Okay, this is typical for any law. Any law. So a law is created. If it happens to do with the California community colleges, the law is usually broad, and then Title V regulations are written by the Chancellor's office, approved by the Board of Governors. And if you go to Title V, that section 55522, that's where probably your beef is. It's not with AB 705, it's with the Title V regulations, okay? All right, so fast forward a couple years, we have a memo that just came out. Now, those Title V regulations said if the colleges aren't doing a good enough job implementing AB 705 and what they've now called equitable placement, then the Chancellor's office can crack the whip. And so that memo from November 2021 is the whip crack from the Chancellor's office. And that's a link at the top to that memo if you need it. So I put it in the chat, and if you need me to put it in the chat again, I'm happy to do that. So what this memo says, and I've highlighted the most important parts because I think it's like a 16-page memo, those of you who've read it. It says the colleges are directed by the Chancellor's office to shift everybody to transfer level math and English, the vast majority of students. And when the districts heard this, they almost all of them just got rid of all pre-transfer coursework in their schedules for the next couple semesters. That's kind of the response. I know at College of Canyons, that's pretty much what we did. It does have some caveats that if a student has a goal other than transfer, some college level math might be appropriate. And then the third piece in there is that pre-transfer courses have not been disallowed. However, you need data if you're going to run them. Now, I was at the Consultation Council yesterday, and this is the piece that I brought up, and it was recorded and it will be posted to the Consultation Council website. So if you search California Community Colleges Consultation Council, you'll find it when it's put up there. And it was near the end. And I did push back on this piece. And Aisha Lowe said very clearly, pre-transfer courses have not been disallowed, but you need to show with data that they're worth it. Here's the problem. Is that it's a chicken and egg issue. If we're not allowed to run them without data showing it, but we don't have the data to show it, how can we run them? How can we prove that we can use those courses if we've been disallowed to have them, right? We're never going to be able to bring them back to a point that we can have those courses. And on top of that, there's a lot of pre-transfer coursework that has nothing to do with transfer students. So if those students aren't being measured in terms of success in any way, then we're in trouble. So we can never really have, yes, are they allowed pre-transfer? Sure, but can we offer them? No. So we can't offer them because the data won't allow us to offer them. And I would argue that there's a lot of problem with the data. FACC did a public records request for the equitable placement data for all the colleges, and I do have that, and if anybody would like it, I can send it to you. Okay, so this, just to summarize where we are, back in 2017, that bill became law. That's law. You're not changing that law. Then we have Title V regulations. The interesting thing about Title V regs is they are changeable. You can modify them. They're modified all the time. And I will give the example of ethnic studies requirement from the idea that we should have that in our degree processes to actually getting it was about a 6-month time period. We also modified the distance education Title V requirements, again, in about 6 months. So Title V is malleable within the system and can be changed. AB 1705 essentially takes most of what is in Title V regs and it codifies it in law if it passes. So I'll repeat that. If AB 1705, as is written now, is passed in the legislature, it will become law. So much of what you don't like in the regs or you have concerns with in the regs will then become law. And then that takes years to change. So there is no more important time for advocacy than now, because we need to be involved in this bill. It affects every single discipline, not just math and English, not just math and English. Our students being able to write and to do quantitative reasoning affects every single discipline, and I would say affects every citizen, right? So this is an important time to have a conversation. So let's talk about 1705. 1705 is being billed as cleanup language for 705. And at this moment, FACC has not taken a position on this piece of legislation. I have been hounded by emails asking, why don't we have an opposed? Well, we are talking to the author. We have been talking to the author since December. We have gotten amendments since December. And when you have an author who is listening and having conversations and understands your concerns, you don't oppose them. So please don't say FACC has an opposed position, because it undermines our ability to negotiate fairly with the legislature. If at some point we have to take an opposed position, we can. But that will come from our Ledge Committee or our Executive Committee. It'll be a conversation with our committees. All right. So what this bill does, and I do have some access to some amendments. Stephanie and I were sent by the author. So what's in print today versus what we know they're going to accept on amendments. Irwin is the author. Somebody asked, Irwin is same author, 1705, same author. There are some amendments. So this language here assumes the amendments, but this bill would prohibit colleges from requiring students to enroll in pre-transfer level English and math coursework under very, very limited circumstances, and provide clarifying amendments to current equitable placement practices consistent with the existing regulations, right? So again, putting those regulations into law. Requires students with a program goal that includes a requirement in written communications and quantitative reasoning courses to be placed, enrolled, and complete. I don't know how the heck we're supposed to make them complete. Transfer level English and math in the first year. And I believe they've changed that to the first time they enter the discipline path. So they've made a little modify, but still they want them to do it not just in a year, but in their first year as soon as possible. And then they've included in the definition of pre-transfer, everything before, anything that doesn't transfer to a UC or CSU, right? A 4-year is transfer. So anything else is pre-transfer, including non-credit, which the whole point of non-credit is to be able to offer courses in those skills that are not yet college level. So the latest amendment includes non-credit as pre-transfer. So this would mean that we can't offer non-credit pre-transfer courses in math and English. We can if they're support, co-requisite support or tutoring, but we can't offer them as a separate class. Okay, so now is the time to advocate, and I do have some ideas for you. But this has been introduced in the Assembly. It was actually late January, but I'll say February. It's going to move to Policy Committee end of March, early April. You may want to consider public comment, but I would try and get to your legislators before then. It'll go to full vote in the Assembly either late May, early June. If it passes the full Assembly, then it will go on to the Senate this summer. And then the full Senate will have a Policy Committee in Senate too. Full vote in September and on to the governor's desk in October. I cannot stress enough that there is incredible, strong political support for this bill. California Acceleration Project, Campaign for College Opportunity, Public Advocates, Ed Trust West, Public Policy Institute of California, they all have created quite a bit of research, I'm doing air quotes, research, showing that AB 705 and the Chancellor's Office guiding placement is the best way to go straight into transfer level for almost every single student. They have been spoon-fed this research and data over several years. There are lots of glossy research documents that look really great. And it will probably be very difficult to stop this bill in totality. Our best option is to try and influence the language of the bill. In doing so, I recommend the next couple things. When you go, I had somebody that I talked to, I went and talked to a group of faculty at Pierce, and one of the faculty said, I'm going to come out swinging. I'm going to go beat up those legislators. I'm going to meet with all of them and beat them up. It's not going to help. They're not going to listen. They're going to meet with you. You can yell at them, but it's not going to be very effective. So the key when you walk in is to acknowledge that many of our previous placement practices created lengthy remedial pathways that were barriers to students. Say it, get it out of your mouth, say AB 705's done some good, please, because they all believe it. So if you go in and say the world is flat when they think the world is round, you're not, the conversation's over. But if you go in and say, okay, it's done some good. We're working really hard. We're implementing it the best we can. But we have noticed a few things, right? And these are the things that we've noticed. Bring some students in. So communicate that we need to preserve pre-transfer in our mission for some students. Pre-transfer includes college level work. College level is pre-transfer. Intermediate algebra is college level, right? So also, if you go in and you're talking about AB 705 and you're trying to undo that law, which again, remember I looked at the law with you, it's not that bad. They're not going to hear you because that's a law that's been passed and you don't have, if you're over here and they're over here, it's going to be a hard conversation. You need to get closer to them and then try and pull them to your side. I'm going to take questions in just a second. John, I see your hand. I'm just going to get through the next couple slides. So this is an amendment that I hope we can all get behind. I also submitted a resolution to the ASCCC Area C meeting. And this came from a faculty member at Pierce, and then we sort of tweaked it. So we think that this would at least preserve the pre-transfer. So placement and enrollment of students in a transfer level English or mathematics course should not prevent students from enrolling in pre-transfer level English or mathematics course when a student determines a course fulfills their academic needs based on a desire to complete a certificate or CTE program, make up for learning loss from the COVID pandemic or break in education, build skills or reskill, or fulfill a lifelong priority in written communication and quantitative reasoning courses. AB 705 shall not prohibit nor deny a student the opportunity to enroll in any pre-transfer level English or math courses based on a student's right to determine for themselves their academic needs. So what this amendment does is it does not challenge AB 1705's mandate on placing students in transfer level math and English, but it leaves the option for our students to make a choice on their own based on what they want to study, right? And what has happened with that big giant narrative I showed you of, the last decade plus of legislation is we're narrowing the community college mission. And this is just one more step to narrow it even more, that students won't have access to the courses that they want. We in our mission have lifelong learning as a mission. And if students choose that they want to take intermediate algebra, they should be allowed to take it. So if the law says place them in trigonometry, fine, place them in trigonometry. But if the student chooses to opt out, let them opt out. Okay, a couple more things, then I'll pause. Here are some other suggested amendments or ideas to talk about. There is an understanding that pre-transfer or remediation is arithmetic. It's not just arithmetic. It's not just how you spell, right? That the legislators have this assumption that we're talking about very remedial classes, not skills that they would need to know in order to perform well at college. So, and I'm sorry, Aileen, your English, I don't have enough English examples. Maybe you can help me add some English examples. But there's lots of skills in between basic arithmetic and trigonometry, right? And I think we need to define for the legislature when we say remediation or pre-transfer, really what those courses are. And then other suggested amendments. What do we need as faculty to do this work? This law was implemented with almost zero support for faculty. So we need to demand, and the author is welcoming this from us. We have heard very positively back from the author. So we have asked for more professional development, embedded faculty tutors in the classroom, smaller class sizes, money to update the classroom environment. The list goes on and on. These are just a few things. But how are you going to support faculty? If we really say, yes, we're going to take all students in transfer level, what do we need to make that happen? And then there's something called the 1805 templates. This was another law from Irwin that came in between 705 and now, that was a data template. And this is the data that the chancellor's office gets from the districts that is saying we're not doing a good job on 705. And those are the reports that I have if anybody wants them. We have asked the author to add drops before census. So if we're moving from placement to enrollment in, right? Placement in transfer level math and English is what AB 705 said, this is enrollment. We need to then collect data on enrollment, which means day one, they're in the class, right before census, they drop because they don't want to have it on their transcript, right? We need to know what that drop is. And I did a very, very back of the napkins sketch out of data from my own college, College of the Canyons. I looked at fall 17 to fall 19, because in math, we early implemented a lot of the AB 705 ideas. And in trigonometry, there's a huge drop. It's about 3 times the amount of students dropped before census, just between those 2 semesters. So we need to look at that. We got this in the language of the bill. The printed version right now, it's in, it was taken out in the amendment. So Stephanie and I are trying to get it back in. The chancellor's office took it out because they said it was too much work to collect one more number, one more data set. It was too much work for them. And then we want to remove the word non-credit from the definition of pre-transfer. So I think I'm going to pause there because I think that's all my slides on 1705. And let's see, we have John. Well, let me ask just a second. Stephanie, if you wouldn't mind checking out the chat for me, and I'll go with hands first, and then we'll go back to the chat. Okay, go ahead, John. You're on.
Okay, thank you. Can you go back, I think, 3 slides? Yes, okay, so try 4 slides. No, go forward. Okay, I think I'll use it. Okay, here's the thing. So it seems like what we're to communicate, try to communicate when we're advocating is something about not so much the value of pre-transfer classes, but the students' rights to take them. And when we get back to say, well, data says that, you know, students are harmed by these pre-transfer classes, in my experience, when I've gotten into discussions about data, it gets into my data is better than yours kind of a thing.
Absolutely.
It does. So, so it seems like I don't know how to push back on that kind of like, you know, because their data is faulty. I think their data is faulty, but there's so I don't know how, you know, to framing it in terms of students' rights to do this. I don't know how to like, I don't know how to counter their framing. And I don't know if they'll even like, you know, accept that kind of framing that students have a right to do something that they think is going to be bad for them.
Right. So, and you know, even the Student Senate is not sponsoring. They're supporting this bill, and I even said to them, "You guys are like literally removing your right to access to a class. This is ridiculous." But they don't quite understand that. But you're right. We can't. The data. So, to address the data, I think the reason why these special interest groups are pushing so hard right now to get this through is because the data is screwed up from COVID. So I think they know that if it goes a couple more years, that the data is not going to be in their favor. However, I agree with you completely that it is very difficult for us to argue the data game because we simply don't have the data. Now, I do have those very in-depth equitable placement data templates for every single college. I'm happy to share them with anybody who wants them and understands data better than me and wants to dive into them and try and find something. I can tell you, like, even in the PPIC, which is the Public Policy Institute of California, had a webinar and they have a glossy report saying how great AB 705 is. Even in their technical addendum, it shows that there's data there that says this isn't the greatest thing since sliced bread. But the legislators are not going to listen to that. They, like I said, they've been spoon-fed positive data about equitable placement for too long. So we're not trying to argue the data game. We are trying to say that it is important to preserve access to this curriculum, that it's exactly the opposite of equitable, right? If you have a one-size-fits-all placement, then I think about, you know, the equity thing where you have the kids on the boxes, right? They all have the same box. And then you say, well, there you go, they're all in the same box. So that's equality, that's not equity. So they're all in the same box if we implement this law. We need to make sure that there are different size approaches, right? Depending on our students, and putting them all in the same bucket is not helpful. But really you have to pick your battles. And I think the best battle we can pick, and I hope I'm not wrong, is to say we need to preserve those pre-transfer pathways for some students, right? And we're not going to argue your major placement, because at least if students can opt out, then we still can educate them. If we don't get that in and this law goes through as is, then we won't have any ability to do any remediation for years. And that's my fear. So I'm sort of like, where's the battle at this moment in time, is to try and make sure that we can say, hey, legislator, if you're really about the students, then why are you limiting student choice? We're not going to mandate that they go in there, but you need to make sure they still have a choice for it. Aileen? Oh, you're muted.
You would think I would have learned by now.
Rookie mistake.
Sorry. So I have a lot to say, and I'm here because on Monday I'm presenting this to the English department. I'm the chair of English at College of the Canyons, and I wanted to say a couple of things. So my dissertation, I'm defending it on next week, is about this. So it's about AB 705 and really investigating what has sorry, what has happened in English as a result. And what the conclusion I've drawn based on the data I've gathered is that our direct placement class has actually created disproportionate impact.
Yeah.
So and very much to speak to what you just said, we've placed all students into one bucket, and we're expecting them all, despite the places they have come from and the advantages they have had or the disadvantages they have had, to perform at the same level.
Mm-hmm.
So I have determined that we have inadvertently, even though the bill's intentions are good, the problem is that the people who are making these bills are not in the classroom and they're not seeing what is happening. So we have experienced a 9% drop in success rates in English, which is huge for us, but we're still at 66% success, which is not enough to determine or to make a determination that we need these pre-transfer level classes. That doesn't meet the bill's standards, right? And what you said was very true, that we can't offer pre-transfer level classes. It's like this chicken and egg, right? You can't offer them, so you can't get data, so then you can't offer them. You know, so it's this bizarre situation we're in. And one thing that's really important is the reason we did the direct placement in the first place was because we had gone to this conference and saw a bunch of data that was collected that showed that students who self-select into these pre-transfer classes are often the ones who don't need them. And they are disproportionately historically excluded populations. So I understand why you are arguing this, but I want to point out that that self-selection process, based on the data I've seen, is often going to, again, create even more disproportionate impact. They need to put this in the hands of the educators. So that's why we have these, why I'm here is because I want to advocate strongly for the non-credit courses to not be counted as pre-transfer. For us, that has been what is saving us. We've created these cohort classes that link non-credit with English 101, and they complete it within one semester. So it's a 4-week non-credit cohort connected to a 12-week English 101, and they get through it. But if that suddenly becomes not an option any longer, we are really doing a disservice to our students.
So for clarification, the co-requisite model for non-credit will exist. They're not trying to get rid of that. They're just trying to get rid of a separate.
Yeah, we have separate classes too. It's not those co-requisites we're only allowed to offer 2 of them because of, you know, our hands are tied with, if you offer those, then you have to offer on-ground classes too. So our hands are really tied with that legislation, which I hate. But we have separate non-credit classes. And to not have those available to students is really, that is going to like kick all of the legs out from under us.
Right. So I'm so glad to hear about your dissertation. We need more data like that, because I can tell you the glossy data reports that, and I'm going to say the research, again, with air quotes, right? Research reports that have come out of these well-funded special interest groups are just, they have just been delivered with these beautiful, you know, webinars, and they've done a really good job so it's so hard to argue against it. I am not saying that it's accurate or that AB 705 or the way it's been implemented is correct or good by asking for this legislation. What I'm saying right now is that we are not going to probably be able to kill 1705. If we kill it, oh my God, I would be so excited, right? But there are politics involved, and I have learned that this bill is very well supported, and based on what happened in the last legislative session with 928 and 1111, which literally flew through no matter how hard we tried to advocate against them, I don't think that we can stop this bill. So and the author is listening to us. So our best option is to try and at least preserve it in our mission, not make it illegal to offer those courses. Then we can start to be able to offer those courses and then undo that data. But so everybody understands how they're saying that this law is effective. They put all the students in one bucket, right? They're putting them all in the transfer level course bucket, and they're trying to catapult that bucket over a wall. Right now, there's the students that decide this is crazy. I'm getting out of the frickin' bucket. They're not even counted. Okay, those are the drops before census. So they're not even counted. They're literally not part of the equation, which I say they should be, because if they're smart enough to jump out of that stupid bucket, they should be counted. Okay, so you put them all in the bucket, you catapult them over the wall, and then those who make it over the wall is called throughput. And that's what they're counting. They're only counting throughput. They're not counting anything else. And so we've put more kids in the bucket, and have we gotten more kids through transfer level math and English? Yes. So that means it's a success. All other details don't matter. It's about how many kids are we getting through transfer level math and English. And again, that is very inequitable, because yes, Aileen, those who are not getting through, that's where you see the equity, right? The inequities growing. And they're simply not looking at that. They're only looking at throughput.
Yeah, and our data shows an increase in Black student success in English 101 by 22%. And that's what they're focusing on. But what they're not focusing on is that overall, it's only at 50%. So yes, it has increased, but wow, we have so much further to go to make progress there. And they're not counting those students who are just dropping out. And It's very frustrating to me that they're using this very unreliable data to make these decisions right now.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you.
Those are, and so I would just want to argue, Wendy, to please advocate for the non-credit courses.
We are. It's on our list.
Totally. Thank you.
It's right there at the bottom.
Perfect.
Remove non-credit from the definition of pre-transfer. That's how we keep it. But definitely, that's on. We've already submitted our latest amendments. We have a meeting hopefully on Thursday with Assembly Member Irwin's office, and that's one of the things on the list. We've tried to like really narrow our advocacy so we can really get, we have a hill to die on. Mario.
Yes, first of all, thank you so much, Wendy, for advocating on our behalf and doing such a great job. I mean, we really appreciate it. I was at a union meeting yesterday talking about your amendments, and people, the first thing they say is, when are you going to stand up and fight for it? Why don't we just try to defeat it? I told them all of your, all of your reasons why. The only thing that you'll stop the lions from jumping on me was the smaller class sizes. If you can get that, I mean, and it has to be mandated, because as you know, like anything else, if you say recommend, the CBOs, they're just going to laugh at it. Oh yeah, really? They like, obviously they recommend 75%, 75-25 for full-time faculty. It's never happened. In fact, it's got worse, right? So if we can get it down to a size 20 for those support classes, for those classes, the AB 705 classes, like at our college, we have a class that has you have support and you have the regular class at the same time. If we can get those down to 20 and mandated, that would be fantastic. I also know that that's the hugest ask, because the author may see that's kind of like trying to sabotage it in portions or something, but that is so crucial to us, because then we actually get something out of this nightmare. We get something, and the reason why I say 20 is because right now English already have classes the size of 25. So if you get 25 for them, you're not helping them at all. But if you can bring it down to 20, then everybody they have 5 less papers to grade. And in Santa Monica, our classes are at 45, 35. So get it down to 20. We can actually do something with this. But anyway, so I just wanted to actually really tell you at the local
we'll try.
Level, yeah, that's I know it's a huge ask, but if you get that, at least that's something there, for us.
Right.
Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome. Kim, go ahead, and I'm going to advance the slides a little bit so that
we don't want to forget the questions in the chat either.
Yeah. Okay, so
yeah, I can be very brief, Wendy. I just want to, because you're talking about advocacy and visiting legislators, and we did set up a visit with some of our students with the Lieutenant Governor's office while we were at the AMP conference. And, just something that always strikes me every time I take students in to meet with legislators is how they don't really listen to the students at all. Like, they have this pre-programmed script that they're working off of, and they think they're doing really great things for students. And so when students express their experience, I find that legislators try to stick that into the script that they already have working in their head instead of really listening to what the student is saying. So just a quick example, I had a student saying that she has 5 ADTs. And they think it's because we're not doing a good job helping her transfer. What she's saying is that every time she's changed her major, she's gotten stuck on an ADT path. And so she's completed all these ADTs because she keeps getting told that that's what she needs to do. And they're not really listening to the fact that she needs space to explore and kind of decide what direction she wants to go in. And so I would just throw that out there so that if you do meet with your legislators and you do take students, that you help train your students to correct them if they're misreading what the student is saying. You know, if they're saying, oh, yes, we know that's a problem and we're fixing transfer for you. Well, that's not really what the problem is. The problem is our college is incentivized to put people in ADTs because they get paid for them. You know, that's like the problem. Yeah. So just, you know, I would just say be careful because they're going to frame it with their script. They're not really listening to what you're saying. And so you have to be mindful of that and work around it a bit, I think. Now, I don't know if we had any impact on the LG's education staffer whatsoever, but she had a number of like rear back moments like, what? Like it was the first time she had ever heard some of it. So
well, Kim, thank you so much for teaching your students. That's what we, even though it might seem like it's not worth it, if we had 55,000 faculty members who did the same thing every month, I'm telling you, it would make a difference.
Yeah, I agree.
One meeting won't, but 55,000 times 12 would. So, okay, we are over time. I'm happy to spend a few more minutes answering questions. Were there a couple in the chat or can I go to Ray? Stephanie just.
Yeah, Deb asked, and I think this ties in really nicely to what you both said. So just kind of a reiteration thing. Should math faculty contact legislators to share with them some of the problems they've been encountering, like students who don't know how to do fractions or who don't know what a numerical sequence is?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think you can, I think it's better if you can bring the student in to say that rather than you saying it. They have been fed this narrative that faculty who are predominantly white, although not all of us are white, right, have this deficit-minded thinking about students. And we assume that a student who hasn't done a pre-transfer, you know, pathway or sequence is going to come in with lacking skills. So avoid that kind of language. Be very, very mindful of that kind of language and go in and say, you know, we could have done a better job making this easier and faster for students, and we're doing everything we possibly can. And even though we're working as hard as we can and we appreciate AB 705 and everything it's done, there are still students who are going to need access to some of these courses, and we simply cannot lose the legal right to offer them. That's literally where we are, guys. Like, I cannot stress that enough. Like, you could say like, oh, I don't believe in AB 705. Fine. But literally we're on the cusp of legally not being able to offer pre-transfer courses. So that's the fight, right? And to fight 705 is not going to work. What we need to say is we need to be able to make sure that students have the choice, not us to put them in it, but students have the choice to take these classes if they want to. Can I go to Ray? Okay, Ray, go ahead.
Thank you. May I share my screen?
I guess. Is it appropriate?
No, it says I can't.
Oh, okay. I think that because it's being recorded, we don't, Lydia blocked it out because we have to be careful. But can you tell us verbally? I don't
just
have
a second.
permission to.
Let me see if I could do it this way. I just sent a link to Stephanie. If she could share her screen, I could speak to it.
I'm just waiting for it to load. I can't get it to load, Ray, but I know you want to speak to the master plan, correct?
Yes, I'm looking at the master plan for higher education in California, 1960, and it differentiates the functions of the three levels. The UC does this, the CSUs does that. Now I'm going to quote verbatim from the master plan. The California community colleges have as their primary mission providing academic and vocational instruction for older and younger students through the first 2 years of undergraduate education. In addition to this primary mission, the community colleges are authorized to provide remedial instruction, English as a second language courses, all non-credit instruction, community service courses, and workforce training courses. So we go into the legislator's office, we put this on their desk, and we say, why are you trying to gut what is the most progressive educational law ever passed in this country. I think that's the approach.
So that I wrote an amendment for the ASCCC area meeting, which then goes to the plenary. And I used what you just read as the whereas, the educational master plans, whereas, those are my whereases, what you just read. And then be it resolved that the ASCCC has to seek this amendment that you guys see on the screen right now. So that is what I used as my argument. Absolutely, you're spot on. It is a mission of our college, and that thing that I showed everybody, you know, I'll go back to what has happened is this series of mandates have narrowed our mission a little bit at a time, chipping away at it till we are only hyper focused on the transfer pathway. Yet little of this legislation, with all the clearing of the pathway or focusing on the pathway of legislation, there's very little any of these have done to actually support students in making it easier for them to transfer, i.e. basic needs, total cost of college, mental health, and room at the four-year institutions, right? So you're absolutely right, Ray. It is the master plan, and that's what they're going after. 100%. Okay, so we are over time and we are losing people. I want to thank everybody for coming. If there's anybody who I didn't address your question, you can email me at president@fac.org. I thank you for your time. And we will have, I know that Bevel asked, when's the next one? We'll get the date up pretty quickly and we'll send you the date. We just haven't had a chance to book it, but the next one I think will be important to focus on part-time faculty bills so we can go through and dissect those.
Yes, and Wendy, just before you go, can you tell me if there's any California community colleges that currently offer health insurance benefits for part-timers?
Yes, yes.
Sure.
The two of the largest, Los Rios and LACCD and Santa Monica.
San Diego does.
San Diego.
Thank you.
Bevel's like, I'm
SNC,
leaving.
though,
I'm leaving.
offers 100% paid, Belleville. Santa Monica is 100%. They pay the whole bill. Not versus the other ones give you 50% or 80 or 60%. We do 100% at SMC.
So Santa Monica College is the model that we should be advocating for.
Well, it's Kaiser, but yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. I have Kaiser. I don't hate it, but I mean, it is, yeah.
If you read
San Diego does
Okay.
100% as well. Yeah.
Okay.
San Diego does
okay,
100%.
good. Thanks very
Time
much.
out.
Yeah.
Time out. Go ahead, Stephanie. We got to close it up.
I was going to say, if you read EdSource, or if you go on the EdSource website and you look under research or product, there was an amazing series of articles that we were both interviewed for as well. That he goes deep into the part-time healthcare. He also talks about how in some districts, trustees get healthcare while part-timers don't. So super interesting. It's Thomas Keel, and highly recommend going to the EdSource website and visiting that.
If trustees get healthcare, is that public information?
Yes.
It is public information.
Okay, so we have to end this because I actually have to go to another meeting I'm late for, and I greatly appreciate everybody's time coming. Again, you can email me questions if we didn't get to it, president@fac.org, and I appreciate your time, and hopefully the resources we provided are helpful. Thank you, everybody.